for everyone who's joining us from the previous session, welcome back. If you're joining us for the first session of your afternoon, welcome to GGP Pride 2021. I'm so excited to be joined for the next 45 minutes by one of our leaders here at Jam City, and we're going to have a very important conversation around the value and importance of gender representation within our industry. And, this is such an important topic to discuss. It's such an important topic to reflect on. And I'm so excited to be talking with Brooke here for the next 45 minutes to be getting insight and to be understanding a little bit more around just the value that gender representation has within games, specifically, within games that of course players play, but also within environments where games are made as well too. So if this is your first time seeing me this weekend, hello, my name is Andrew. I'm a member of our recruiting team here at Jam City. I use he, him pronouns as well too. And I'm joined by Brooke McKnight here. And Brooke, if you wouldn't mind just starting us off by giving me a little bit of an introduction, your pronouns, your role here at Jam City. And I'd love to just learn kind of briefly to kick off, like, how did you get to where you're at now?
Sure. So my name's Brooke McKnight. I go by the pronouns she and her, and I am the vice president of product marketing at Jam City. I've been with you guys for a little over a month now, so I'm a little new, but my career in gaming is not new. I began 15 years ago. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's been 15 years. And I started at NBC Universal in 2006. I was hired on as an assistant on the games and digital platform team within Universal, which is a very, very small group and a very, very large company. And we were responsible for driving revenue via interactive experiences, utilizing the company's vast library of IP. So Jurassic and Fast and Furious and Despicable Me were some of the main key brands that I was focused on. It was an entry-level position, and I remember in my interview, this was so long ago, they asked me, if I've ever played games or if I even have a Facebook and those kind of things. And this was before iPhone came out. So there was a lot. It was very different kind of world at that time. Console games were being bought at the store, and there wasn't a lot of digital platforms. So even the word digital was kind of a mysterious, unique thing that we were doing.
Gotcha. Awesome. I mean, I love just your experience in seeing the industry kind of grow as well too. I'm sure alongside your career, you've kind of seen the industry shift in new directions, from the tech that's being used in the industry to the IP that you're now working on. I think one of the things, even from my own experience, that has drastically changed over time is the audience for who plays games, right? I remember growing up, I had two older brothers, and the common face that you see when you thought of a gamer was a male, right? That was commonly what was seen with games like Grand Theft Auto and Fast and Furious, where the industry was heading in a direction where it was predominantly catering to men, to boys, right, who were playing these games. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective, just to start, let's dive right into it. How has the face of a gamer changed now from your perspective? And this can be in the games, in actually what you see. I'm curious, how has it changed, if it has?
For sure. And, I had a similar situation. I had two little brothers, and I would go to the arcades, in the 90s. And I was always like one of the only females in the arcades. And I would play, Chun-Li. And it was really gratifying to beat them with a female character. And being the only female. And so, yes, it's definitely changed, at least the perception, I feel is going in the right direction. And even despite the perception, I still feel like a lot of people think that gamers are men, but the ratio of female to male gamers is actually pretty balanced. It changes with regard to the genres in some cases. I think that's going to change as well as we move forward, because even though people look at match 3 casual games as more female dominated, or core, first person shooters is more male dominated, there's still like evidence and data that men are playing, casual mobile games and women are playing first shooter games. And I think, especially as we build for more gender neutral audiences, we build with inclusivity in mind. And we're not building specifically for a gender, but for a player behavior. I feel like that's going to continue to just get better and better. In the past, I remember, like, everyone knows the story of, Pac-Man, in the 80s, like the developers realized that some women were actually playing Pac-Man. So like, they're like, oh, like put a bow on it and do like Mrs. Pac-Man, or, they were creating girl-oriented material that is like, oh, Barbie games, these are for girls. Like Nancy Drew, this is for girls. But I think that as there's been movement to expand like beyond the existing market and like have less focus on like games that are made for like straight white males and have like more diverse kind of characters, females that are not over sexualized, like actually strong, protagonist females and games like The Last of Us. Or even some like more gender neutral games like Animal Crossing recently. Like we're seeing that there's like a lot of games that are expanding audiences, and that's great for the industry and great for consumers as well. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think when I joined the industry about 3 years ago, I was actually a little surprised to see how much importance and value was being put on inclusion and diversity, just because, like I had mentioned, most of my background was that gaming was this male dominated space and everything was geared to boys, right? And I love that you touched on like now game changers and the people that are behind the development of these games are thinking more thoroughly around, not just catering to a specific audience or creating it from their lens, but we're now hiring people from different also backgrounds and are coming in and they're giving input around that. I mean, you look at games, you mentioned a few of us, like The Last of Us, where the protagonist is, a female lead, or games like Apex Legends, where you have LGBTQI representation. You have female characters who aren't just decked out, in all pink outfits, which of course is great, but also they can change and they can wear different colors. It's not just this idea of what it should be. And I think as a player, you see representation being more seen in the entertainment that you're playing. So on that keyword for a second, talking about representation, I guess looking at it from the lens now of Brooke, what does representation to you mean, and how do you see it out in the wild, and I guess overall, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think representation means that like the power to influence within the industry is shared equally amongst like a diverse group of individuals. I think there's no representation without diversity, really, truly. And I think, for myself in the industry, I've often been the only female at a table. I have often been the only gay female at a table as well. And I think you need to have a lot of different opinions and thoughts to truly represent like who we are as a culture. And then, you said it too. It's like we need to have a diverse group of individuals working in the industry that are making games that represent like who we are as a society and our culture. And I think that's really important. I think that Jam City, especially, is trying to make sure that when we're hiring, we're thinking of diversity in mind. There's a lot of female leaders at our company, and that's kind of what that's a big reason why I wanted to come work at Jam City. Lisa Anderson and my boss Vanessa Rahani, like they are amazing and great at what they do. And I think that's really important, is to have kind of that representation within a company that can actually build games that are also representing different voices, LGBTQ communities as well. I'm glad that you mentioned Apex Legends. That's amazing. Like, I think that more of that needs to be in our games. I think, there was when I was at Universal, you mentioned Fast and Furious as kind of almost like being like more male leaning, but more recently we were making a game for Fast and Furious, and we wanted to include a non-binary character. We approached educate Dylan to do voiceover, and I was so thrilled when they accepted and decided to do it for us. So things like that, we need to make sure that we're focused on making games that represent like everyone, not just like females, but also different ethnicities, different sexualities as well. So yeah, it's important.
Absolutely. And I think such a key part of what you mentioned was that there was that representation in the room, and there's people who are thoughtful about those things as well too. And I feel like that's such a thing important more from like a thing to think about, excuse me, important thing to think about from the industry side is the value of having people in the room who are thoughtful about these things, right? They're
Absolutely.
somebody who slows down and thinks about what voices are we missing that we haven't included in these narratives or on these teams that we're hiring for. Such an important factor of that as well. So I'd love to kind of take it a few steps back now and talk a little bit more about specifically your career as well too. Did you ever imagine, being a leader in an industry where at one point, it's male dominated or was male dominated, and if so, how has that, I guess, influence of the industry played a part in your career now?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, at the beginning, no, I didn't imagine myself as a leader. I think I told you I started off as an assistant, right?
Mhm.
And so I think, sometimes when you're in an entry level position, you can't even imagine yourself like as a vice president. Like that just seems so like crazy to even think of yourself in that way. But even though I've been in such a male dominated industry, I've been lucky because I feel like I've worked with men who have been so encouraging and have advocated for me. I think that's also important is when you are the minority for the
Yep.
majority to advocate on your behalf in order for you to kind of go up in to become an equal, right? And they wanted me in meetings. They saw the value in the work that I was doing. They saw the value in my opinions, and so over time, I started becoming very, very confident and feeling like, oh, I think I can be a leader in this industry. I think I can, come to the table with some ideas that, people want to consider and think about. And I think it's been very important for me, and it's been the most fulfilling part of my career, is knowing that I've come from a place where, especially 15 years ago, when definitely I was the only female in a room most times. Like walking through GDC, I would look around and think, I don't think most of these women are here actually like in a similar position that I'm in. And then now, getting to this point where I'm in more meetings with women. I'm seeing, the next generation of developers and marketers in this industry are like there's more women that are coming in, and that's just so exciting to see. I think I didn't consider it for myself, but I hope that, more women in an entry level position at this stage are like feeling like they can do it, seeing the path that I've taken. And whenever I speak to someone who's like more like just coming in, I
Mhm.
always tell them I'm like, as an assistant, I started off as an assistant, and I think that's important for them to hear.
100%. I mean, it's just empowering to sometimes hear that, and I think oftentimes leaders, now on the notion of like leadership, leaders can often forget to, speak on that part of their story with pride, right? Like I came from a place where I was an assistant for a specific department, or I grew in an industry that was, like, kind of stacked against me in terms of the odds or whatnot. And it's such a valuable thing to hear, being on the other side of that. If you're just starting in your career, it's empowering, it's inspiring. It kind of sets the tone and helps you kind of direct the vision that you want to go in as well too. I love that you mentioned the example of also walking, through conventions or like GDC and walking through conventions and feeling this sense of like, wait a minute, am I here for the same reasons that other women are here? Or even for me, a few years back going to conventions where there wasn't as much like gay representation as like a gay Latino, I didn't see enough people like me, in the games and at the booths and in the panels. So I often kind of felt siloed in that way. And I
Yeah.
think feeling siloed is a big thing that you can face as a minority in a in an industry sometimes like gaming or like tech. I'm curious to hear from your perspective. What do you think are some of the toughest challenges that you think women face in the gaming industry? And this can be from the notion of a career in gaming, or even things like streaming and esports, right? There's still work to be done there.
Yeah.
From your perspective, like, what do you think are some of those tough challenges?
I think you kind of nailed it, right? Like, I think there's still a lot of work to be done there. There's a huge percentage of women who play games, but a lot of them don't consider themselves gamers,
Mm,
right? So there was a study that was done recently on that. And I think, there's still a lot of stereotypes with regard to what game, like what is a, what's a game? Like it's a core, it has to be, Call of Duty for it to be a game. You have to be playing Call of Duty or World of Warcraft to be a gamer. And I think that there's a little bit of that's going on, that is maybe hindering some women from, and in other minorities, from thinking of themselves as like someone who belongs in this
uh,
industry. And that, I think, is going to be a challenge. It's going to continue to be a challenge. But it's great that we're having conversations like this, because hopefully there's, a young woman somewhere, or, a young gay person or Latino person who's like, oh, this is amazing. Look at Andrew and Brooke, like they're doing it. Like I can do it too. So I think, doing things like this, where you're speaking publicly about it, that's important. And I would like to encourage more people to do it. I think I should do more myself, even, just to kind of change those perceptions. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love what you said around too, like feeling like you can identify as a gamer, or like you belong.
Mhm.
I think that's so scary if you're just starting off, even as a player. You can often feel like, okay, well, I can't tell my friends that I'm gaming because they're going to automatically assume that I'm playing Call of Duty, or they're going to automatically assume that I'm playing, Overwatch or whatnot, all these amazing games. But I think sometimes people often forget, well, games are made for everyone, and there's so many different types of genres. You can classify yourself as a gamer if you're playing Cookie Jam for 40 hours a week, or if
Of
you're playing
course.
Harry Potter Hogwarts Mystery, right? You're engaging with interactive entertainment at the end of the day. And
Hmm.
absolutely wear that badge of honor with pride. And you could step into that part of your identity of being a gamer as well too. So I love what you mentioned just around it. There's so much of like just genres now, and there's so many different types of ways of coming into the larger gaming community. Um, I'd love to just kind of pick your brain a second on your expertise, which is product marketing. And I'd love to dive into, kind of seeing your time at NBC and all the different titles that you worked at, and how you strategize around product marketing for these different titles. Has product marketing changed at all with the focus of inclusion now being a top priority?
Yes, absolutely. I think we're doing a much better job, especially within like the marketing material that we create. And just I used to just almost like forget that I should be representing myself as I'm, marketing these games, and others even, right? It's like, as a marketing team, you're like, oh, the primary audience is 25-year-old male, and that's who we should be, putting our marketing efforts against, is finding that specific person. But I think now, sorry, loud motor. I think now, we, again, I think I mentioned this. Jam City, we're focused on finding, an audience based on player behaviors,
Hmm.
and I really like that. I think it also encourages developers to build features that reach different like behaviors. And it doesn't mean that it's like male or female. It just means that like there's different types of people that like, enjoy different things about games, right? Like, you have some players that like really enjoy being competitive. You have other players that, enjoy creative expression, and it doesn't need to be a male or female targeted audience. It's like a player and what they enjoy. And so I think that also from a marketing perspective, we're starting to promote in that way as well. And even when we're looking at marketing materials, if it's we want to make sure that it's inclusive, right? So you're looking at Not creating assets that just have like, white males or just white people. You want to have like every single person represented in those assets. And also, you're not necessarily just going after an audience that's male or female. You're going after an audience and the things that you think that they like about a particular game. So I think it has changed quite a bit, and I'm glad for it. And I think I still still need to kind of check myself sometimes when I'm reviewing marketing plans or looking at marketing materials, like, hey, like, am I being too close-minded about who this product could be for? And I think developers need to think about that too. So it's kind of it's interesting how things have changed. It's beneficial for all of us if we're inclusive and we think about diversity, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're dovetailing so perfectly into also my next question, which is also around kind of the benefits around having these thoughtful processes and thinking and also taking action to improve representation in the game development process and also in the games that we create as well too. So can you maybe tell me a little bit more about your thoughts in how do businesses specifically benefit from having more of a focus on gender representation? And that could be anything from hiring practices to representation in gaming. And if there's any sort of maybe like business return or even insights you can share with us around the benefits of that, I'd love to know more.
For sure. I mean, if you're narrowing your scope to a very specific audience, then you're only reaching that very, very specific audience. If you're expanding to reach, more audiences and more player behaviors, then you're naturally like increasing the amount of people who might be interested in your product or your marketing. And so, for businesses, like, that's obviously beneficial because if you have more players playing your game, it's great for business. It helps to drive revenue. And, I mean, it shouldn't be the bottom line. I mean, we should be doing this. We should make sure that we're inclusive and we're diverse just from a cultural perspective, regardless, but it does help with the bottom line, right? At the end of the day. So that's great. That's great because it's mutually beneficial. But corporations, I think, regardless of whether they think that their audience is male and they should be focused on that, they should still be thinking about like, how do we change this so that, when other people come to our game, that they don't feel like they're not represented. I think it's important. It's important to make sure that people feel represented. And I was in our backgrounds, there's a person in a wheelchair, and I know that we're just talking specifically about those things, but Xbox is making avatars of people who are in wheelchairs, and I think that that's amazing. And there's like other examples of that where it's like, I don't know how much business return there is for that, but they're doing it, right? And I think that that's important. We should all be doing things like that.
Absolutely, 100%. I was speaking to our head of DE&I yesterday, Fran, around just the importance of the word of intention, right? When we launch new initiatives in our games or new product features or new avatars, like sometimes the intention isn't business return. Sometimes knowing what's right and knowing that our audience is made of a ton of different makeup and that this might only appeal to a very small percentage of our audience or maybe a really big percentage, but either way, it's the intention to feel inclusive for these communities, right? So,
absolutely.
Just I guess taking a little bit of a stab at something here. What is your advice, or what would you say that businesses can do to kind of close this gap in between, for this conversation, gender representation and opportunities in gaming? Like, where do one even begin on that?
Yeah, I think it's the same kind of theme that we've been discussing, which is like making sure that you're hiring and, with diversity in mind, allowing for, it's not just hiring with diversity in mind, but allowing for those diverse conversations, like those voices to have influence in the room and change the conversation that's happening if it's needed, right? And people, I think a lot of there's it's great to have, a pride logo in some of your corporate material, but if you're not actually like doing the work to make sure that, you're really living out like those core values, then, does it matter? So I think, corporations should really focus on ensuring that, from the very top, like with the business leaders, that there's diversity, not just at the bottom, so that people can actually truly make an impact. I think you'd asked me about representation, and the key point there is that the diverse people need to have, actual influence on decision making. And so I think that if we continue to move in that direction, it'll only get better.
Yeah. 100%. I think decision-making abilities is so important, because if your diversity isn't a part of that table, or if they're not helping and guide the decision-making, then you kind of lost a lot of purpose there. You've lost a lot of intention with hiring a diverse team as well too. I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit with this one,
Sure.
but can you maybe tell me how, like in your career, like where have you seen diversity like benefit? Like the most? Is there a specific time that you could recall where you were in a room where you saw someone voice their opinion based on an identity, where you just were like, snaps to that, because that right there is the power of a diverse team?
Well, um, I can give you an example of something that happened to me
Yeah.
in a meeting. So I had gone with another female colleague of mine to visit Apple, right? And we had met with our Apple rep. And I had come back from that meeting that I thought was successful, and I was sitting at the table, only female, in the leadership team, on the leadership team. And I started kind of talking about, my experience at Apple and how I thought like the meeting went really well. And one of the other male senior leaders said, "We should have sent a man to go."
No.
And
No.
I was like, okay. What was great about that moment is that I didn't even need to say anything. All the other male members were like, "No, absolutely not. Like, these two females are amazing at what they do. Like, we're not going to talk like that." And so like in that moment, like things like this happen, right? Like they continue to happen. I brought that particular story up because, it was great that, in normal cases, like it might have to be me myself saying, "Hey, like that's not okay." And that still happens, right? People have to speak up for themselves, but it's great. It's also great when others are speaking up, like, and advocating and saying, "Hey, like that's not okay." I think in my career, I've had moments like that where, there weren't a lot others around, and they didn't hear it and they didn't see it, right? And so I was afraid to say something because I didn't want to look as though like I'm playing the woman card, so I think, it's important for women and anyone who's being marginalized in the workplace to say something and to speak up, right? Um, it's important. Otherwise, and this person was dealt with, and that's great, and I'm sure learned a lesson as well. So I think those kinds of moments, and they still happen. So you have to speak up.
Such a good example. I mean, and you kind of touched on this theme of like allyship a few times now, kind of throughout the conversation here. You mentioned allyship, and not only just in the value of gender representation, but also sexuality, race, ability, all
Yep.
of that is so important. Um, Also, to put you on the spot a little bit here too, but I'm sure you have such great advice for this specific question, which is, how does somebody serve as a strong ally, in your opinion? And this doesn't have to be in the form of just gender representation, it can be in any identities. Or is there any sort of, when you think about also even how you serve as an ally to other communities,
Mhm.
what's some tips that you would maybe give somebody who's scratching their head a little bit, unsure as to how to be a strong ally for a community?
Oh yeah, I mean that's a great question. I'd show up, like speak out, you know. You've got to stand for others. As someone who is white, you know, I need to stand up for other minorities. You know, I need to be outspoken, and ensure that, you know, I'm an ally and I advocate on their behalf. You know, recently there was, you know, with everything that was happening in the Asian community, you know, in my previous company, I really wanted to do something about that and speak out, and make sure that the company was speaking out. And an Asian leader at the company thought it wasn't necessary. And so I had a conversation with him where it led him to this place where he was like, oh, this is the whole problem, is that as an Asian person, I didn't think it was necessary to say something, and maybe I should, right? And so I think, yeah, having those hard conversations and making sure that you're, you know, really actually truly standing up and speaking out is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking up and calling it out, like you said, giving a platform for people to also share stories or share insights is so important to that. And I kind of, love that example of what you said around being able to just challenge the status quo sometimes when companies don't think about these things or even think about speaking up. It's being the person that challenges that to stay
Mhm.
and kind of put yourself out on the limb for a second and think about it and saying, should we say something here? What can we do to push this message forward for this specific community
Yeah,
as well too? So
absolutely.
taking a few steps back now on kind of the topic around gender representation in games, I'm curious to kind of get your insight around what advice do you have, maybe for it can be girl gamers, it could be non-binary gamers, it could be anyone who identifies as a woman or a girl and who's maybe a little bit afraid of a career in the industry. What advice would you give them about what they can expect and what they should think about when they consider a career in games?
Yeah, I think the advice that I can give is to have, like, the most important advice is to have confidence in yourself and your abilities. You know, throughout my career, I've been, you know, trying to mentor other you know, newer team members and train, and that's kind of one of the things I've noticed that has held people back the most,
Mm,
like, is that they themselves are, you know, not truly, you know, feeling like they're comfortable to, like, have an opinion in a meeting or present, you know, like their feelings on something. And I think it's important. I think it is, you know, it goes back to, you know, we need to have diverse voices. Like, just because your opinion doesn't sound like it's the opinion that, you know, others may have, like, doesn't mean that you shouldn't bring it forward. Like, in fact, you should bring it forward if it's something that sounds like it's unique or it's different, or, you know, something we should consider. Speak up, right? Come to work and think about, like, how you might look at something outside of the box. It's especially true in marketing, right? Like, we're constantly trying to think of, like, the newer ideas, like what's fresh, what's exciting, what's, you know, and that's, it's for myself, you know, because I've been in the industry for 15 years. Sometimes I just, like, by habit go back to the same kind of, you know, strategies. And it's nice to have, like, the younger team members come with fresh perspectives, and we need more of that. Like, but it's, I know sometimes it's intimidating to not want to share, you know, something that, like, you feel like, you know, people aren't going to like. So I think that that's the advice I'd like to give, is like, hey, like, fresh perspectives are really important, and we need them, you know. I personally need them. I mean, I've had a lot of situations where I'm habitually going back to the same ideas, and it's like, no, 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 no. I, like, need someone to tell me, like, something new.
Absolutely. I mean, I think confidence is such a key thing. And I think
Hmm.
that, I don't know about for you, but there was definitely a moment in my career where that confidence piece kind of clicked. And I think it before then, like it was a little bit there. I was teetering on it for a second. But I think I love the theme again that you mentioned around just having teams around you that also lift you up. And I think that's
Hmm.
such a huge part in that confidence factor that you just mentioned. It's having a team around you that also can uplift you and can also be challenged by you and your thoughts on things as well too. So going back to now, kind of thinking about just the longevity that you've had in your career as well too, and kind of the different roles that you were in and the different teams that you worked in. If you could give yourself one piece of advice at any point in your career now looking back at it, like what would that piece of advice have been?
Oh, I mean, for myself, I think that I've struggled with the same, the same problem that I think that we just discussed, like confidence, right? And so, I think about myself like earlier in my career, and I didn't quite it's the same thing that it didn't click for me that I could say something and it would like actually turn into a
Right.
thing that happened, right? And so um when that started happening, when I was like able to present in meetings and feel like I was commanding a room, I was like, oh my God, like they're listening to me, and things are changing and I'm making an impact. I think that's also important for I had mentioned, I've had a lot of people throughout my career who have given me an opportunity to present my own material, right? Like to come forth with my own ideas and have ownership and autonomy.
Yeah.
And so I try to do that for my own teams as well, as much as I can. And there's a lot of, you have to kind of let go and trust that someone can present their own materials. And 9 times out of 10, I'm like pleasantly surprised by people. Like I'm like, oh, like there's a time as a manager where I would just I'm like, oh, I'll just do it myself rather than like have to teach them or train them how to do this. And I people have to be able to learn and they have to have the space in order to do that. So even if it's something that maybe I didn't agree with, I mean, fine, like they brought something to the table and now we can have a conversation about it. And so I think it's truly important, right? Like for me to give an opportunity to others that I was able to receive, which is like, hey, like I was able to talk at conferences or present in meetings, large meetings to executives. Like they also need that opportunity as well. So for my, the advice that I'd give to myself is like the same advice I guess I would give to, others. And the other thing too is like you think that uh you think that, oh, I'll never get to that next level. Like here I am at this, entry level position and it's taking so long. But then you look back like after 10 years and you're like, wow, like so much has changed, so many things have happened. And you have a tendency to forget like that you are growing, and it's just not obvious to yourself, right? And so you lose that confidence. Yeah.
Hmm. I mean, you touched on so many just important things there in that answer, whether it's the confidence or it's the raising your hand or it's the finding opportunities to present or finding opportunities to like feel that empowerment as well too. I think all of those things ultimately, they put in the work with confidence and they help you grow that. They help you kind of get to that mental state as well too, where you can feel more confident in your workplace and in your career as well too. So all nuggets of wisdom. Well, that about does it for the questions that I had here for you, Brooke. This has been so insightful. GGP team, if there's any questions that we got during the session, please feel free to drop them as well too. I think we might be good on that end as well. But Brooke, one last question for you, just because I've been asking it to everyone this weekend, because I love to just have a fun question, which is if you could have been, in your case, let's say product marketing, if you could have been behind the product marketing of any game that has been created ever, what game would it have been for you?
Well, I mentioned it at the top, but The Last of Us, like
Right?
it's incredibly well done, and it kind of hits on all of the key points that we've been discussing. I think we should be making more games like that. right? Like it's just a beautiful story that both men and women and anyone can feel like they, can play, and, they're represented. And I would have loved to have been a part of that particular game, but I'm also proud of a lot of the work that we've done both at, like my previous career at Universal and at Jam City. I think like we're making games that are incredibly inclusive. I have had the pleasure. This is crazy, but I went back and counted how many games that I've worked on or tried to, and it's like over 150. So for that, I just feel lucky because I've had just like this incredible career, and the benefit and the pleasure of working on so many like different types of titles for different types of players. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just it's an honor to be at Jam City, a company that I think truly believes in diversity, and I was so excited to be part of this panel today. June 26th is actually like a special day. And I like looked at my Facebook memories, and I was going back, and it was like, oh, I was excited because the Supreme Court had overturned DOMA like on this day, right? Like, so it was kind of like what was that?
6 or 7 years ago, was it? I can't remember.
It was like 2013, so yeah, 8 years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, so it's things have changed a lot since then, and so yeah, so I'm just excited to see them continue to go in that positive direction.
And on that note, we will wrap things up here. That was a good note to end things on. Thank you again so much for being a part of the session, and thanks for everyone who's watching. If you're tuning in to the Pride Fest for the rest of the stream, we have another session being brought to you by our GMC team in about 15-20 minutes at the top of the hour, where we'll talk a little bit more about portfolios and what makes a perfect portfolio in the game world. But for now, thank you, Brooke. Thank you to everyone watching, and I'll see everybody in a few minutes. Bye, everyone.
Bye.